starting off with our first news story, we are talking about AirTags. And we've talked about AirTags on the show quite a bit, about how they're being used to track people illegally, which is not fun. And now that's getting worse because people on eBay are reselling AirTags without a speaker inside them. And they put a disclaimer on their listing as well. Do not use this for tracking people, but we all know somebody's selling a silent AirTag and somebody buys a silent AirTag, they're not going to be buying it for personal use. At least I don't see any way of using that. But what are you guys' thoughts on that?
Go ahead, Taylor. You can start it off.
Oh man, listen, I'm just. We always had a feeling that this kind of thing would happen. You know, I mean, it's a given. But like, just to think that people would use them in crazy ways, like tracking people, it's just why, you know, like it just, that's just a lack of privacy, and that's not Apple. Like, we know that, you know. So I really hope that there's some way to stop this, because it's just, I feel like ever since we started first hearing that, you know, AirTags had this issue, it just kept going downhill and worse. I don't know about you guys, but
yeah, a buddy of mine, Travis MCP, actually made a video about this, I think, right around the time when AirTags came out.
I've mentioned that so many times.
Yeah, and it is kind of interesting. I mean, obviously, it's kind of a gray area, because I think part of the purpose of having AirTags is to have that speaker. Like, personally, I have AirTags. I use one on my keychain, and then, to be honest, I use tile tracking for everything else, just because it's easier to attach tiles, I think, still, even though there's accessories out there. But I've always used it for preventative measures, like to prevent, obviously, something from getting lost. But the thing that really got me in love with tile trackers before AirTags came out was the ability to be notified if you left something behind. And that's something I think that within, I don't think it was at launch, but within a couple of weeks of the AirTags launch, was also incorporated into, I think, an iOS update, or maybe it was just a firmware update. But the idea is that, like, you could be alerted if you happen to leave the house without your wallet or something like that. So that's what I think the main purpose is. That's in general. Obviously, it's Apple's idea behind it, at least I would assume, is to put basically a Find My functionality in practically any item you want. Now, obviously, anytime you're dealing with tracking devices of any sort, it's anything in general. It could be exploited in a way, depending on, you know, what it is. But this is one of those things where it's like, I don't think, I'm pretty sure it's not Apple's fault, and I don't think Apple sees it necessarily as a huge problem, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Apple step in and flick one little switch that'll be like solving the entire problem, and we'll all be like, oh yeah, if we just do that, like, it solves the problem. But that, and I think the other thing too is how people forget, but also just because of how large the Find My network is with AirTags, people don't realize they're Bluetooth trackers, right? But I think they're being treated as and seen as GPS trackers. So there's still that Bluetooth kind of limitation on it, but it's one of those things where it's just, the technology, I think, is above people's heads sometimes, where I'm not saying this isn't an issue, but I do think perhaps it's being blown out of proportion, and you have just, again, with many things in life, just a few bad examples overshadowing the larger purpose behind it.
Yeah, for sure. And we've talked about this on the show before, but BMAC, what are your thoughts on, like, how Apple can regulate this? Maybe any ideas you have?
It's tough. No, so the reason why, to be completely honest, I haven't looked totally into this because I've just been busy doing my own stuff. But what I understand is that they're removing the speaker because of the ability for the AirTags to automatically sound a beep or create a sound when they've been following someone or somebody nearby with an Apple device when the AirTag is not connected to that iCloud device, right? So it's basically saying, hey, this AirTag is following you, and it'll do a little bleep sound. And I believe Apple markets that as their way to kind of draw attention to a lost item so it could be found, and then you could do one of two things. You know, you could just stick your iPhone near it, or even Android near it for the NFC reader, I believe, to get a message. That's the intention behind it, and people are removing the speaker because they just want to remove that functionality of it where it beeps when it's following. It seems to be following an iCloud device that is not connected to it, right? That's the main issue here.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah,
I think they could do something pretty easily to. You don't necessarily want to turn that off because it's a privacy feature in and of itself. But if people are going to take a product apart, people have modded products from the start, whether it be, I remember, probably shouldn't even say this on air, but if one were to have had a PSP back in the day, one might have modded it to be able to do some custom firmware on it. And I'm just saying, that, everyone's messed with it at some point.
Oh, yeah.
More so in the past, I've, been more interested in that stuff when you're, looking into custom firmware. But anyway, people are going to do that too with AirTag. It's just something that's going to happen.
Oh, yeah. For sure.
And I think that's with anything, really. Like, you can use something for good or for bad. Like, people use their smartphones to, I don't know, to run their business, and then some people will use it to stalk people and take pictures of them. It's like, it's there's a good and evil with everything. And I think this kind of, I could kind of see a couple of reasons to remove the speaker from AirTags. Like, maybe, in case your bag gets stolen and you don't want the thief to find out that there's an AirTag in the bag, that kind of stuff.
Great point. Yep, that was the original, I think, concern when people heard about that. And people say Apple didn't think about that. Like, oh yeah, it'll make a sound. I don't know if Apple explicitly said it's, to prevent you from being tracked so you could hear it, but I think also what they said is, but it's also a feature in and of itself so you could hear a lost item beeping near you and then you could return it to its rightful owner. Again, in both case scenarios, it could be exploited and have the opposite effect, but removing the speaker could be an Personally, I think the speaker is trash, and I've said this before. I'm not ashamed to say
that loud,
it. It's terrible, and just the pitch of it is very, and again, that's to be completely honest, that's usually why I use tile tracker devices in most of my products that I need a tracker on, because it is, for some reason, louder. And because of the tone, at least with my ears, it's easier to actually, if I'm in a room, hear where it's coming from. I don't know what it is about the AirTags, but even if I do hear them, which is not often, because I do think they're quieter than they should be, just the way the sound is, it's very hard for me to actually find the location based on the sound emitting from it. So anyway, to your point, Benji, they could remove the speaker and I wouldn't be heartbroken. Just saying.
Yeah, and I think also another good thing about the AirTags as opposed to Tile is even the precision tracking. Yes, the speaker may not be that loud, but you can still track it through the phone.
Yep.
And I mean, I've even seen I don't know if you've ever heard of the Chipolo one, Spot. They're like a kind of like an AirTag, and it works on the Find My network. And they also have a wallet version that you could fit in and things like that. I worked with them on a video quite recently, and their speaker's a lot louder as well, which is good. But I mean, I guess going back to the whole silent AirTags thing, I think you're right. The speaker is pretty bad, and I don't know if they will fix that or how they change it and things like that.
I mean, the typical Apple, this would be in hot water either way. People would say, oh, you bought them to have the sound, so if they disable it, obviously that'd be basically bait and switch based on what you were purchasing. Maybe in a generation, you could solve it probably by coming out with a Generation 2 with a louder speaker or a removal of the speaker. It's just, when you get into tracker products like this, there's just always going to be, again, those situations where exploited, and luckily, we're not the company that has to figure it out. Apple is the one who's selling the product, so we just get to comment on it. It's tough. It's a tough situation because you could see both sides of it very easily.